The Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return.
Hello, I'm Joni Siegel, the host of the Addiction Podcast. In 2022, over 100,000 people died from drug and alcohol abuse, and that number is growing daily. Fentanyl poisoning, pot, cocaine, heroin, and even psychedelics and alcohol all contribute to this crisis, while we're bombarded with promotions from thousands of rehabs. Newborns are born addicted, and the majority of homeless people struggle with drug addiction. Drug dealers exploit online resources to sell to teens, and antidepressant use is spiraling out of control. This podcast features brutally honest guest interviews revealing harsh realities and offering hope and solutions through their stories. We don't sugarcoat anything. Guests speak raw and real. More importantly, you'll find inspiration to understand, overcome, and achieve recovery, whether for yourself or to help others, some within your own family, many among your friends or associates. Whether you're seeking help or just a glimmer of hope, our podcast equips you with the latest insights to confront this generational battle. Many listeners tell us they want to join the fight, but do not have the time or money to act, lobby, or just help. If that's you, go to www.patreon.com/theaddictionpodcast and see how you can help. Anne, thank you so much for being on the podcast today and being willing to share your story and your son's story with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You were recently on the RNC, at the RNC, and you spoke about what happened with your son. Can you tell us what occurred with Weston?
Well, Weston was just a really sweet kid. He was a really good kid, lots of friends, very good student, 3.5 GPA at a very hard school. It's hard to get good grades at. He was really doing very well. He was, just a typical teenager, just loving life, surfing and playing football and hockey and spending time with us on the weekends and, we family dinners. A really good kid. And, got caught up with a brand new crowd when we switched into a new school. And I think he wanted to fit in, and peer pressure got to him.
Hi, my name is Amy Newman, and my husband Bobby and I have a business called Newman Intervention Services. We provide intervention services for families who have loved ones struggling with drug addiction. Our goal is to help individuals get the support and treatment they need to overcome addiction and start on the path to recovery. With our personalized and compassionate approach, we guide families through the challenging process of getting their loved one into rehab and onto a road of a healthier future. Together, we can make a positive difference in the lives of those affected by drugs. If you or someone you know is in need of an intervention, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Let's work together and bring hope and healing to those battling addiction.
Call 866-989-4499 today and say the word podcast to get a 10% discount. Or go to newmaninterventions.com and type in the word podcast for a 10% discount. This service comes with a free 1-hour consultation with Bobby. And he hadn't been using drugs for a long time, right?
No.
So was he smoking marijuana? Is that how he was poisoned with fentanyl?
No. He tried what we believe is a quarter of the Percocet, which all these kids do these days. They call them perks. There's all these street names for all these things now. And it wasn't a Percocet. If it was, he'd still be alive. And if it was exactly what he thought he was doing, he wouldn't have died, because a quarter of a Percocet wouldn't kill an infant. It's not going to kill a 15-year-old kid. So What it really was is something different. It contained just plain powder and poison in it, poison known as fentanyl. So my son died of poisoning. He was poisoned to death. He was murdered. It is a homicide investigation because it is a murder, and it should be treated as such. So my son didn't overdose. It wasn't accidental overdose. It was a cold-hearted murder, and that's very hard to swallow.
I understand. And let me just tell you, as a mom, I am extremely sorry for the loss of your son. Yeah. There is I can't imagine pain like that. I can't. I think that the fact that you are willing to speak out about it is huge. I don't know that I would be able to do that if I went through something like that. I do have 2 sons who are grown, and I don't know that I would be able to take a stance like you have. And I applaud you as a mom for being willing to do that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And I'm also glad to hear that there is, it's hard to say glad to hear, but this is poisoning. This is flat out poisoning. You are correct. It is flat out murder. It is not someone who is addicted to drugs overdosing on heroin. That's a different thing. And this is flat out poisoning of our young people.
I want to make a point about that too. People who are flat out doing heroin don't deserve to be murdered either.
Nope.
I think they're doing heroin and they're taking fentanyl. That's not okay either. People struggle with drug addictions. It's very sad. A lot of times they just have anxiety or they're just having a tough time in life.
Yep.
And that numbs away their pain and they're self-medicating. And it's not okay for them to be poisoned either. And it's not okay for anyone to be poisoned or misled and take something that they don't know that they're doing. And sometimes we hear that people are doing it on purpose. And quite frankly, there's no safe amount of fentanyl and it's still poisoned. In my book, no matter what, if you die of fentanyl, you are dying of a poisoning because it is so lethal. It is more lethal per volume than cyanide. Cyanide is a poison. This is a poisoning. People are getting poisoned. And I don't care what way it happens, but if it happens, it's a murder and it's a poisoning, period.
I think you make a good point. And I remember watching one of the congressional hearings with a mother whose son had died. And, the politicians kept saying, oh, yes, drug addict. Oh, yes, overdose. Oh, yes, drug addict, overdose. And they weren't quite getting the point that this is different. This is poisoning. This is not just overdosing, No. And I think that is, I hate to say it this way, but I think sometimes for people who cannot confront what is going on, that's kind of an easy way out for them to say, oh, well, these are just drug addicts. These people have drug problems. No. That's not what's going on here. And, I talked to you a little bit before we got live, and I said, it's not a political issue. But unfortunately, it's been made a political issue because the current administration allowed the borders from Mexico to be wide open. And we know from previous guests we've had on the podcast that people walk fentanyl across the border. It just comes right across the border. And now it's one of those things where, I know it's, I don't know why somebody can't just go, oh, we made a mistake, let's close the borders. You are listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. For more information on the podcast or to reach out if you have a story you would like to share with us, go to our Facebook page by the same name, or you can email us at theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com or go to our website, theaddictionpodcast.com. And please remember to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts and give us a 5-star review. We appreciate you listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. We don't do this podcast because we are former addicts. We don't do this podcast because we have loved ones who have suffered from addiction. We do this podcast because we feel that addiction is one of the biggest problems facing the world today, and that no matter who you are, no matter your religion, no matter your income status, no matter your race, no matter anything about you, addiction affects you. This podcast is a free resource for anybody looking for help with addiction.
Well, that's just one part of it. Yes, we need to close the borders. We need to get back to what Trump was. And I'm sorry, I know you said that.
It's okay. It's okay.
But Donald Trump was trying to secure the border. He had a lot of Democrat mayors and governors, like Gavin Newsom, who refused to comply. So it still got over. But yes, that is one thing. We need to seal the borders for sure. We need more border patrol. We need a lot more support at the border. We also need to go after the cartels heavily. They need to be obliterated from the face of this earth like terrorists. We need SEAL Team 6 to go, drop in on them and take them out, because this is a war on American soil. We need China to shut down their factories like Trump had them shut down. When Biden came in, he allowed them to continue on with making the precursor chemicals. These are all facts and they're well documented. If you'd like to go research them, be my guest. And we need de minimis loopholes shut, which is anything under $800 does not have to be inspected by customs, and it can come over here, and it is coming over here through your internet shopping as a guise under internet shopping. So we need to close the de minimis loophole. We need to criminalize criminals here. So all these things this administration can be doing, and they're not. And the only thing I would ask is why? Why wouldn't they do something about the number one killer of people ages 18 to 45 and quickly becoming the number one killer of teens, and 14 and under being one of the fastest growing demographics? I see infants, I see toddlers, I see young kids being killed every day by people who are using nearby, or they touch a table where someone has used their hand in their mouth. This is affecting all ages. And people are losing kids. Last year alone, over 100,000 kids died. Parents, over 100,000 parents have lost children. And I say kids, parents will always refer to their children as kids, whether they're 30 or 29. But the number one killer, ages 18 to 45, and there is zero COVID response. Zero. Nobody is doing a damn thing. Biden, in his 42nd month, tried to put together a weak bill that put secondary security at the ports of entry only on machines that we already had, by the way, that he threw into a closet because he thought that, he needed to virtue signal instead of keep these machines there. And so he wants to buy brand new machines when we already have perfectly good ones from Trump that he threw in a closet. As a secondary level of security at the ports of entry, unless I track drug dealers don't go through the ports of entry. Occasionally we will find them. We just had a very huge bust down in Arizona that could have wiped out 250 million people in the United States. It was one of the largest busts we've ever had. And thank you to Border Patrol on that. No thank you to the Biden administration. But there was a bill that he did try to pass doing that secondary security of brand new machines at the ports of entry only, when we have perfectly good machines. But it also gave a ton of money to the Ukraine and some money to the Gaza Strip. So these are what they're doing, trying to pass, legislation in 42 months into the presidency. It's not helpful. It doesn't benefit Americans. It doesn't do anything to solve the problem. But he does get to say that he did something. He put secondary security at the ports of entry, which are already there when he came into office, that he got rid of. So no, really, he didn't do anything.
Understood.
Sorry, I am tough on this administration.
It's okay.
Zero. There's nobody's criminalizing. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, had one of the most amazing pieces of legislation that she signed in to her state, which was death penalty if you sell to somebody and a child dies. Also life imprisonment for selling to someone who dies from fentanyl, and they're all being charged with murder. And her legislation is amazing. She is one of the strongest governors on this, and I just absolutely love her. If we had that, people would not be selling it as much. If they knew their life was in danger by selling it, they wouldn't be selling it. If they knew they were going to go to prison for life, they wouldn't be selling it. We need to do something. We're doing zero.
Right.
Zero. Nothing's being done.
Where is this piece of legislation, Anne?
In Arkansas, Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
But has it been, it's passed? So it's in effect?
Well, she's a governor, yeah.
Oh, okay.
She signed it into her state.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So that needs to happen in all states.
It does. There's been some other governors who have been really, really solid as well. But hers is by far the lead we need to follow.
Okay.
For sure. And I believe President Trump, when he comes in, he will do the exact same thing. He will absolutely clean house.
Well, he lets you, you spoke at the RNC, and I know he was there listening. So we can hope that if he gets elected, he will take note of what you said. I tend to think you will.
Yes.
So if someone in their state wanted to get this type of legislation passed, would you recommend that they write to their governor or write to their representative and get the legislation passed? Can they do that?
Sure. I mean, I think people, there are a lot of people in every state right now trying really hard to get legislation passed. The problem is like places like California, where every single solitary fentanyl bill is voted down. I'm sorry to say this again, by Democrats, but It's unanimous every single time. Every single Democrat votes down every single fentanyl bill. It's just the truth. And you can go to california.gov and go look at it and see for yourself. It's plain as day. I'm not saying anything that's not true.
I understand. And did you know any of this before Weston passed away? Were you aware of any of this going on?
Not to this degree. I mean, I had heard about fentanyl. I heard that there was enough fentanyl in America to kill every person 7 times over. It was becoming a big epidemic at that point. It wasn't, we know a lot more now. It was never going to happen in my house. I mean, that sort of thing happened to us. So no, I didn't know about it in the way that, I think all parents should know today. Had I known about it, I would have, probably done a lot more educating on peer pressure and stuff like that. But hindsight is 2020. My son was a very strong kid, very strong-willed, great friends, always had a ton of friends. I never, ever thought that he would cave to peer pressure, ever. But these dealers, these kids that, that have it, that are dealing it at young ages, and the people above them are very manipulative. They're very conniving. They're very cunning. They speak your kids' languages. They know exactly how to manipulate your kids to get your kids to try things, and they'll keep pushing on them until they try them. So I know my son was strong, but I think he eventually caved in order to make friends.
Wow. What would you, if you could tell parents something about what they should do to maybe hopefully avoid this with their kids, what would you tell them, Anne?
Run scenarios of peer pressure. What are you going to do when someone comes around and they, ask you to try something? How are you going to say no? How are you going to get out of the situation? What if everybody's doing it and you're the only one that won't? They're telling you that you're too scared, or you're, a loser, or you're, stupid for not trying it. I think running those scenarios and helping your kids have the confidence and be prepared to be able to get out of these situations, I think is very important. A lot of these drug dealers are have a mentality of a groomer, like a sexual predator type of mentality, where they get your kid to do something illegal and then they hold it over their head, or maybe they get them to try something and say, hey, you know what? You can't tell your parents, but I got a little bit more. It will ease your discomfort. Because when you try fentanyl, within 3 hours, you have withdrawal symptoms that make chemotherapy look like a picnic in the park. It is very painful to withdraw from fentanyl after one time. So within 3 hours, your kids are going to be completely floored, sick to their stomachs, fevers, cold sweats, everything. So these drug dealers know that. And that's when they step in and say, hey, your parents will be really disappointed if you told them what you did. And some kids, they're scared, and that's how groomers work, right? They take advantage of their Achilles heel. And so that's their Achilles heel. They've done something illegal and they don't want to tell their parents because they don't want to disappoint them. And these drug dealers are so disgusting. They're the scum of the earth. And they, that's what they do. And they get your kid addicted. And kids might live a few weeks. Eventually they'll die. Afraid to tell you because not only did they do that one time, but now they've done it several times. I think a lot of kids start to break down to their parents and tell their parents. A lot of parents are blindsided, have no idea that their kids have ever done it. If they survive the first pill, it's not a matter of if they're going to die, it's when.
Right.
Unless severe and very, very, very intense therapy is put in front of them. And I'm talking like years of therapy. And, this is the addiction podcast, so I'm assuming that a lot of people know about things like this. But, they need intense inpatient therapy to get over fentanyl. It rewires your brain immediately. They feel like for the rest of their life, they're going to want to do it.
Yep.
So that's just an evil drug, evil people pushing evil drugs. There's nothing about this drug that is not evil.
Yep.
Disgusting, honestly.
I think that's a good message for parents. And I think parents, you have to be willing to experience any communication that your son or daughter wants to give you. And rather than just being reactionary, listen and see what you can do to help them, because it can happen to you. This is not, this doesn't just happen to Republican kids. It doesn't just happen to Democratic kids. It doesn't just happen to poor kids, rich kids, black kids, white kids. It's happening to all different children. Everybody. And so if you think that your child is not at risk, you need to think again, and you need to have the conversation with them, running scenarios like Anne said about what are you going to do when you get this peer pressure and you're the only one that doesn't want to try this stuff. What are you going to do? How are you going to handle it? Who can you call? What can you say? Where can you go? And be willing to accept the communication back if they say, well, I've already been in that situation. You can't just get mad at them. You got to reinforce what they did that was right and see if you can, get them to take a look at how they can handle it going forward, because it only takes one time with fentanyl to die.
If you find out that your kid has tried fentanyl one time and it's been recently, you need to get them into rehab immediately.
Yep.
And I say that very seriously.
Yep.
Because they will try it again. They will do it again.
Yep. Because it's addictive. It's very addictive.
Yeah, you don't play with that. No. I mean, I've told parents to put their kids in a 72-hour hold while they figure out where they're going to send them because it's that bad.
Yeah.
You don't have time. You do not have time. With fentanyl, you're out of time. And teaching your kids, these people know how to speak your kids' language. Teach your kids how to speak, to people like who are trying to do this to them, how to speak their language. Because I always taught my kids, if someone, tells you that, you're a bad person or that they're going to, tell on you, like if you do something, I used to tell my kids, like, come tell me, because they're the ones who are going to be in trouble. I understand, like, working, with church and with schools, like, we have to watch all these things about groomers, and they get the kids to do something that's illegal so that they can take advantage of them. So I have always told my kids, if someone ever tells you that they're going to hurt mommy and daddy, or someone ever tells you that you're bad and that you should never tell anybody, come tell me right away. And I will make sure that that person gets in big trouble, or I'll make sure that we have a conversation, or I'll make sure that I shield you from that person and nothing bad is going to ever happen to mommy and daddy.
Yep.
So these people are groomers. They are very well trained.
Yep.
There's a lot of money they're dealing with. So they're very well trained, and they put the best of the best out there to hunt for your children.
And thank you for talking to us today. It's a very tough subject. Again, I'm extremely sorry for your loss, but thank you for fighting the good fight and helping other parents to maybe not have to experience it.
Thank you.
This is not a political podcast, but it is unfortunate that the current administration decided that the borders from Mexico should be wide open. And since then, the instances of young people dying from fentanyl is of epic proportions. And it's unfortunate. It's not even unfortunate. It's actually criminal. It's disgusting. And if you have children, if you have grandchildren, I'm going to grab my 11-year-old. I'm going to talk to her about this. She goes to private school. She only hangs out with kids that go to private school. But I'm going to have this conversation with her because it's scary. It's a scary environment. And hopefully things will change. With a change in the government. We can hope, right? So we'll be back again with another interview next week. And thank you once again for listening.
You have been listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. For more information, reach out to us on Facebook or go to www.theaddictionpodcast.com. Our email is theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com.